attack on Iran is not generating the level of geopolitical risk that many expected. Now you know why OPEC Plus decided to massively increase production just a few weeks ago. The members of OPEC probably knew that there was something happening and there would likely be an increase in tensions between Israel and Iran. And that came, incidentally, because there was an immediate response in June from the International Organization of Atomic Energy, in which they were already condemning Iran for not complying with the transparency and commitment to not build proliferation in its nuclear fleet. Iran massively increased its amount of enriched uranium, and that has created this response. The effect on oil prices has been basically just to generate a short squeeze. Oil prices have lost completely any type of geopolitical risk premium. And what the conflict has generated is a recovery in that geopolitical risk premium, but nothing more. In fact, oil prices are basically flat on the year, and the market is understanding that new OPEC supply is likely going to offset any risks coming from the conflict with Iran, i.e. Saudi Arabia, Russia, Emirates, and other producers are going to massively increase production and offset any limitations coming from Iran. In this graph, courtesy of Bloomberg, what we can see is that the entire improvement in oil prices has come from geopolitical concerns, but not from supply and demand dynamics. The Strait of Hormuz is not under threat. What we can see is the following. The Strait of Hormuz is seeing an absolutely normal transit of ships, and the threats coming from the Iran regime are proving to be exaggerations. So the risk on the fleet and the risk on transport is relatively modest, and that is certainly what the market is assuming. The biggest beneficiary of Iran's oil exports is China, and therefore China is also the most negatively impacted from the conflict between Iran and Israel. However, the reason why OPEC Plus decided to increase production in the past weeks after the very aggressive message from the International Atomic Energy Organization about the lack of compliance of Iran is that Russia and other producers are actually offsetting the Iran impact, and therefore China's imports of oil are likely to continue to be strong, and there will be ample supply to attend the level of demand growth. We have seen a slight improvement in the Baltic Dry Index, but what we are actually seeing is the following. The Baltic Dry Index is basically just recovering part of the losses seen in the past months, like what we are seeing with oil. So there is not an aggressive change of trend. There is basically a bounce after a very weak trend. And in the next months, we need to confirm whether this bounce remains or whether it's going to be affected, as in the past, by weak manufacturing demand and certainly weak demand growth for oil and other products. OPEC production is rising. Saudi Arabia, Russia, Emirates, and others are increasing oil production in an environment of rising geopolitical concerns. Therefore, supply is not a challenge. Supply is ample and continues to be very robust, considering that excess capacity in many of these producers is more than what Iran exports every year. Inflationary pressures are not evident anywhere when we look at the different components. Let's go to the next graph. Gold, at the same time, is reflecting the rise in geopolitical risk that is helping oil bounce and the Baltic Dry Index bounce, but gold prices are also reflecting the reality of monetary destruction. And that's what we need to pay attention to. Only gold and Bitcoin are going to stop the incentives of governments of destroying the purchasing power of currencies. Central banks have completely abandoned their place and their policy of limiting, of curbing government excess. Therefore, the only ones that are actually going to do that right now are gold and Bitcoin, which are substituting many of fiat currencies as reserve assets in central banks. This is a very important factor because central banks continue to be exceedingly dovish, and more importantly, because most interventionist governments are not willing to reduce their destruction of the purchasing power of the currency that they issue. Inflation is always a monetary phenomenon. Governments are the ones that create inflation, and governments can stop it only by reducing expenditure. Gold is reflecting that very few governments want to do that. So gold protects you against the destruction of fiat currencies, Bitcoin as well. Keep defending freedom. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel, like my videos, leave your comments below, and keep defending freedom. Thank you very much.